Richard claims she witnessed Diddy beat his former girlfriend Cassie and was punished when trying to intervene. She alleges Diddy threatened her life, withheld her earnings, and subjected her to inhumane working conditions, including being groped and assaulted.
It has been a long journey to get here. She did not want to hide. Why should she hide her head in shame? She has not done anything wrong.
The 4-4, all you heard was Papa, don't hit me no more. Let's go. Kick in the door, waving the 4-4. Hey, 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 yeah.
There's more to this tale than just Diddy throwing a punch. What if the true scandal isn't what Diddy did, but rather how the whole music business chose to ignore it? The reality may cause you to reconsider who is truly in charge in Hollywood. The moment Diddy punched Cassie in front of Usher changed everything. For years, this tale was kept under wraps, but now that Usher is finally disclosing the whole details, let's dig into this bizarre lawsuit. Usher never imagined he would witness anything like this. If you haven't heard, Don Richard recently sued Diddy, dropping bombs everywhere and presenting an absolutely terrible picture of the musician. Don was formerly signed by Diddy, first as a member of Danity Kane and then with Dirty Money. She briefly lived in his circle, and we all know how it ended for those gals. Diddy kept them under his control from the beginning. Aubrey O'Day was always very outspoken about the suffering they endured, but Dawn was less so. She had to keep quiet in order to avoid signing a contract. Dawn has been largely silent about it all up until this point. She did, however, have this one incident where she unintentionally spilled some tea about how Diddy would get mad at her and her bandmate. Diddy basically told her, "I'll let you go if you don't talk trash about me." In the lawsuit, Keena was known for losing his mind during practices and making the players feel as though they weren't even worthy of being in the game. Dawn gave a bleak impression of her time spent under Diddy's thumb, claiming that during one of their outbursts, he once imprisoned her in his car for 2 hours. Yes, you read it correctly. During Saturday Night Live's SNL practice with Diddy Dirty Money, when Dawn finally stood up for herself and told him to stop, Diddy literally clenched his fists like he was ready to swing. Luckily, his bodyguard intervened before things got violent, but even then, the bodyguard locked her in his Bentley while she screamed for help. Fortunately, she had her phone, so she called her dad, who hopped on a train from Baltimore to NYC ready to throw her hands on Diddy himself. When Diddy showed up, he was ready to bring the cops into this mess, but Diddy had other plans. He apparently delivered a terrifying threat to Dawn's father. "Just to start, consider your daughter's future profession and your family." Dawn claims that when Dawn became involved with Diddy in 2004 to form the band, what first appeared to be her big break turned into a nightmare because Diddy had her working like a machine, never letting her rest, hardly eating her, and always making threats. Diddy was out here demeaning the female competitors with every slur in the book and calling them fat and ugly. But the true horror show Dawn claims that during rehearsal days, they were forced to work beyond their physical limits without food, sleep, or breaks. And Dawn claims that she gained a lot of weight and even developed rashes as a result of being strapped to a microphone all the time. Dawn compares this to being on MTV and watching your health deteriorate in front of the cameras. If she even considered leaving the studio, he would snap, saying, "Where the __, are you going? We've got an album." Oh, and there's the money, or lack thereof, that Dawn claims Diddy owes her a staggering $1.2 million in royalties and an additional $335,000 for tour earnings. She also promoted Diddy Beats and other brands without receiving any compensation at all. In other words, she was working hard and he was keeping the money. But it gets worse. Dawn CL Diddy not only mistreated her financially, but also physically. According to her, he would force her to strip down to her underwear, humiliate her by calling her names like lazy, ugly, and you name it, and criticize her appearance in front of his entourage. Once, while she was getting ready for a fitting, Diddy touched her while feigning to show a stylist how he wanted her breast straps. He would also smack her and make fun of her for being too thin. And let's not even talk about the Christmas present he suggested, breast implants. He really told her, "You're in a cup, I'm thinking D." Imagine your boss telling you that on top of everything else, Dawn was stranded in the thick of Diddy's infamous crazy parties. She would be in the studio during wild parties where everything went. Occasionally, Diddy would try her in front of everyone, pushing her over boundaries she didn't want to be crossed. This wasn't an isolated incident. He did this often, driving her to the brink, She felt trapped by Diddy's threats, which went beyond contracts and money, and he would boast about how he could make people vanish and get away with it. This is one of the most tragic aspects of her complaint. It was warfare using psychology. Things grew even more severe for Dawn in 2010 after years of Diddy's non-stop grind. Her health completely plummeted and she was diagnosed with anemia. She was constantly terrified for herself and her family. He even warned her not to call her dad unless you're in the hospital. Dawn claims that the constant stress and strain she endured while living under Diddy's supervision is the reason for her rapidly declining white blood cell count, severely damaged joints, and arthralgia, a fancy way of saying that her body was disintegrating. Furthermore, we already know that Cassie is not the only one making these claims. Sue Diddy for the appalling way he treated her. We've all seen snippets of it on film, but Dawn Richard provided some astounding details that further cloud the picture in her case. Dawn claimed that one of the most disturbing things she ever seen was Diddy literally touching Cassie in front of everyone as if it were nothing at all. Assuming that Cassie had done something wrong, Diddy storms into the kitchen, calling her the B word, screaming that she never does anything right, and hurling a hot skillet full of eggs at her. Richard claims that Diddy was furious with Cassie for not cooking the eggs correctly, and that he was high as a kite, strangling her and pulling her up the stairs like some kind of monster. Dawn wanted to intervene, but her bandmate Keena stopped her, telling her that Diddy was too dangerous, and Diddy made sure Dawn and Keena didn't talk about what they witnessed the next day. He effectively told them to keep quiet by locking them in a poorly lit studio room and pulling off this whole power trip, which he called a lover's trip. Security cameras even captured Diddy kicking and dragging Cassie through a hallway, but Diddy allegedly threw $50,000 at hotel staff to make that footage disappear. Dawn was terrified, and who could blame her? Diddy was arguing and saying this is normal, this is what love is, and just in case that wasn't manipulative enough, he throws and people end up missing, a straight-up threat. From grabbing Cassie by the neck in front of partygoers to outright punching her at a prestigious industry dinner in front of power players like Jimmy Iovine, Dawn's lawsuit paints an even more horrific image of his dominance. The man had no chill. Dawn and Keena even made an attempt to assist Cassie in breaking free by pleading with her to permanently part ways with Diddy, but the outcome clearly hit back with statements like, "You want to die today and I end people." Dawn understood fully that to cross Diddy was to risk everything, but that wasn't the only occasion that Diddy acted violently toward Cassie in public. Dawn revealed another shocking incident that happened at a dinner party. Diddy punched Cassie in the stomach. This happened in front of music industry giants, which includes Usher, Neo, Jimmy Iovine, and other big names in the business. These people don't just happen to be there. They are the ones who make or break careers. However, when Diddy is said to have punched Cassie, not a single word was said. While Cassie was sobbing and in agony, everyone continued to eat as if nothing had occurred. Cassie was discreetly escorted out of the room by Diddy's assistant Capricorn Clark while the party continued. Capricorn Clark said that seeing Diddy act so aggressively toward Cassie in front of all these influential people made her fear for her own safety. Can you imagine working in a place where you're always watching your back to see if you're the next victim? It's like a twisted game of see no evil, hear no evil. But the thing is that by remaining silent, these stars may have contributed to the continuation of this abuse cycle. You might be wondering, why didn't they just speak up? Well, the lawsuit makes it more complicated than that. Richard's testimony depicts an industry where the powerful do what they want and everyone else has to deal with it. Diddy had a method for making sure people kept quiet. Top business figures remaining silent is like giving abusers the go-ahead to do anything as long as they have the power, which is a nightmare for the victims who are left thinking, if Neo and Usher remain silent, who will believe me? It's no surprise that Usher spent some of his formative years at Diddy's infamous Flavor Camp. For those who are unfamiliar with the term, it was Diddy's private getaway where young artists would come to train collaboratively and allegedly get exposed to the wild side of the entertainment industry. Usher, who was just a teenager at the time, lived there under Diddy's wing, and the rumors surrounding what went on during those years have only grown louder. Recently, Diddy's name has been appearing more and more frequently.
I moved to New York City and I lived with Sean Puffy Combs for a year.
That's the crazy thing. Now, that was L.A. Reid's idea, right? We're sending you
New
over
York
to
City.
something called Puffy Flavor.
Imagine being so little and surrounded by things that at that age, no one should see.
You were 13. What were you
I
seeing?
went there to see the lifestyle,
Right.
And I saw it, and it was, but I don't know if I could indulge and understand what I was even looking at. It was pretty wild.
So nobody tried to, some woman didn't come along.
I ain't say that.
Okay.
Usher has not disclosed much about the actual events that occurred during his stay at Flavor Camp, but with everything coming to light now, one can't help but wonder what kind of long-lasting effects those encounters may have had on him. Dawn reportedly mentioned watching Kim Porter, another ex-girlfriend of Diddy, leave his studio in tears with bruises on her lips and face. Usher witnessed the stories didn't end with Cindy. Diddy mistreated women on a regular basis. It wasn't only physical abuse. Dawn asserts it's no surprise that Dawn was terrified of Diddy during their time together. She saw too much and her fear was real. However, this is where things get messy. Diddy had these infamous drug-fueled parties where he would invite underage girls. You can imagine what happened next. His guests would do horrible things to these women. And here's the wild part. He even hired police officers to attend these parties. Yep, he hired police officers to attend so everyone would know his influence stretched into law enforcement. That's why no one ever stopped him. Dawn's credibility is being questioned by some because, despite everything, she had previously expressed interest in continuing to collaborate with Diddy. In fact, she had even offered to contribute to the Making the Band reunion in 2020 and had even given him one of her songs, Deliver Me, for his Love album. Diddy has been a gatekeeper in the music industry for years, so it's easy to understand why Dawn felt she had to play nice. The pandemic hit everyone hard, and Dawn was likely just trying to survive, even if it meant working with the man who had wronged her. However, just because Dawn was friendly with him doesn't mean her claims aren't genuine. People put up with a lot when they feel like their careers or even their lives are in jeopardy. So while it may have harmed her case somewhat that she remained silent for so long and even collaborated with Diddy later, it doesn't Kina. Although I completely support Dawn's freedom to recount her experiences, Dawn's bandmate Kina actually stood out against Dawn's accusations. Kina's perspective was that, although she and Dawn had some experiences, she didn't perceive things the same way she wrote. Although I was present in some of the same professional settings as Elle, she wants to emphasize that her account is her personal perspective and should not be interpreted as a universal truth applicable to everyone involved. Many of the allegations and incidents described in this suit are not representative of my experiences, and some do not align with my own truth. Essentially, since Kina exposed the flaw in this card, which is understandable, I'm not playing with it. Although Kina's husband Tony Vick is friends with Diddy, so there is undoubtedly a conflict of interest for her to publicly support Dawn's lawsuit, it is still disappointing, especially in light of the fact that Dawn once attempted to assist Kina in leaving her own allegedly abusive relationship. In the end, even though Dawn's experiences with Diddy differ from Kina's, they are still valid. Despite all of this, Diddy's empire flourished, and he was able to lock in a $50 million agreement with international scope as if nothing had happened. It is evident that Diddy has a strong effect on those around him. The lawsuit suggests that Diddy's success only served to inflate his ego, leading him to believe that fame and wealth would protect him from the fallout. The recent lawsuit against Diddy has opened the floodgates of accusations, shedding light not only on the alleged actions of Diddy himself, but also on the larger institutions that allowed such behavior to persist unchecked. In addition to targeting Diddy, the lawsuit directly accuses major players like Interscope, GE, and A&M Records of turning a blind eye to the violence and misconduct, all while profiting from their relationship with him. These allegations paint a troubling picture of how deeply flawed the system is when someone with Diddy's level of power, influence, and wealth can seemingly operate above the law. It's no longer just about Diddy being labeled as a bad guy. It's about an entire industry that appears complicit in perpetuating a toxic culture that protects the powerful at the expense of those with less influence. The lawsuit emphasizes that those at the bottom of the food chain are left with no real recourse, forced to stay silent, accept the abuse, and suffer the consequences of speaking out. Meanwhile, those in positions of authority, both individuals and corporate entities, turn a blind eye to the suffering as long as profits continue to roll in. Public outrage has only intensified as more details about the case come to light. People aren't just furious at Diddy, they're also starting to question all the big-name corporations and industry leaders who stood by and did nothing while Diddy was allegedly involved in a series of violent acts, particularly toward his former partner, Cassie. This has led to widespread calls for accountability. One fan remarked, "This man's downfall is going to expose the entire music industry." Many feel that Diddy's alleged accomplices, whether they directly participated in the actions or remained silent, bear just as much responsibility. The lawsuit portrays their inaction as enabling, allowing Diddy's harmful behavior to continue unchecked, all while they continued to profit from his career. For many, the revelation that these major corporations might have knowingly allowed such behavior to persist is not just shocking, it's enraging. Fans are now looking beyond Diddy and at the entire infrastructure that kept him at the top, wondering how deep the rot really goes. One of the most damning aspects of the case is how it reveals a culture of silence, where those who should have acted instead chose to protect their financial interests. These companies, whose names are synonymous with some of the biggest successes in the music industry, are now facing a backlash that may challenge the very foundations of their operations. This lawsuit could have far-reaching implications, potentially sparking a larger conversation about the role these corporations play in enabling the abuses of their most powerful artists. The entire music industry, which has often been accused of mistreating artists, could find itself in the crosshairs as more people start to question just how deep this problem goes. The implications of this lawsuit go far beyond Diddy's personal conduct. It's starting to uncover the darker side of an industry that's long been shrouded in secrecy and power dynamics that heavily favor the rich and influential. For many, it's a matter of holding the entire system accountable, especially when it appears that those with power and money are shielded from the consequences of their actions. As more details emerge, the pressure is mounting, not just on Diddy, but on the entire industry. People are no longer willing to accept excuses or deflections. They want real accountability. And as the case continues, it's becoming clear that Diddy's downfall could very well mark the beginning of a much larger reckoning for the music industry as a whole. The culture of silence, protection, and complicity that has allowed these alleged actions to go on for so long may finally be cracking. Fans, former colleagues, and even those within the industry are beginning to speak out, making it clear that Diddy's downfall won't be an isolated incident. It may just be the first domino to fall in a much larger chain. What remains to be seen is how the industry will respond. Will these major corporations face consequences for their alleged complicity, or will they manage to distance themselves from Diddy and continue business as usual? One thing is for sure, the public is watching closely, and they won't forget how this plays out. As Diddy's empire crumbles around him, it's likely that many more names will be dragged into the spotlight, whether they like it or not. This case is about more than just one man. It's about an entire industry reckoning with its own dark past. Stay tuned for further developments, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, be sure to watch the next video for more in-depth coverage on the unfolding drama surrounding Diddy and the music industry.